This didn't happen to me, but my older sister. My sister was home alone one evening while my mother, my other sister, and I went out for dinner. As we're driving home, my mother receives a phone call from my sister. Now, we didn't hear what my sister said, but I saw my mom's eyes go wide, and she told my sister to lock herself in the bedroom, that she was almost home. When we got home, we arrived to find my sister hiding in her bedroom, absolutely sobbing. Apparently, when we were gone, my sister was watching TV alone in the living room, in view of the front door and front windows. While she was watching TV, she heard the doorknob attempt to be turned. She immediately jumped up from the couch and hid behind the TV. This was back in the day. There weren't any flat screens, and we had one of those massive TVs with the really wide backs. When she peeked around the TV to the door, she saw a man with his hands cupped around his eyes, looking back at her from the window. After they made eye contact, he once again attempted to open the locked front door with a little more force. That's when she called my mom, freaking out. What really shook me about the incident is that we live in a very rural area. I mean, we lived on a dirt road that was about 10 miles from the nearest town, with our only neighbor being an elderly woman who lived alone down the road. We moved soon after, for unrelated reasons, but I never had a decent night's sleep in that house after that night. So, this is 2 stories. This is my second post on here. If this doesn't fit here, just let me know. One time when I was 12, I was at the mall with my family. My sister wanted to go into a store, and I wanted to go into another one. So my dad said, fine, go ahead. We will be right over here. I went into Fry's, when it still existed over here, and just looked at all the different albums and whatnot. And I specifically remember looking at a Whitesnake CD, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this man, in his 40s, come straight towards my way after entering the store. I knew right away something was not right. He stood right next to me and pretended to look at a CD, and moved closer to me after about a minute, and I stood there pretending to still look and not make it obvious that I knew what was happening. I played it off and just moved around to the other set of CDs on the other side of the case, and was going to make my way out casually. He's still pretending to look but watching me. I casually walked out, and as soon as I left, I darted to find my dad and everyone else, and I looked behind me to see if the guy was still following me. So I went into a crowd to try to lose him, and he was trying to look above the crowd to find me, and he caught up eventually, but I was headed down the escalator by the time, and there I saw my dad, and I saw the man leaving into Macy's. It was the scariest thing that ever happened to me at the time. I never told anyone what happened that day. I'm a very shy person, so me going to ask an employee for help was not really an option for me at that time. It's just how I was. No need to crucify me over that. This other time back when me and my friend were about 15 or 16, both female, we're out walking around at night, just goofing around, no big deal. It wasn't extremely late, like 8 or 9 at night. I live in a really safe city, suburbs if you will. So we were just walking around, just doing whatever, and where I live, there are 4 neighborhoods all right next to each other. 2 across the street from me, and 1 right next to my neighborhood. There, for some reason, is just a stretch of no streetlights. Not a long stretch, but long enough, and then you're at the intersection, and then there's a grocery store / plaza, which is important. So we make our way around, run into some guy banging on this door, screaming at these people to let him in, and we stopped dead in our tracks and turned around. He didn't see us, but it was weird. He was in a UPS uniform. It was weird. Anyway, so making our way back, we're walking through the grocery store plaza. I think we went in there for a second to get something and made our way to the sidewalk back to my house. I noticed 3 people at the donation drop-off taking stuff out. Of course, this is where no lights parts begin. I didn't make it noticeable that I see this going on and kept walking. My friend doesn't think anything of it, but I wanted to keep my eye on them because something felt off. As soon as we passed them and walked a little away, I looked back to make sure we weren't being followed. My heart dropped. I see a figure running after us with a white bag. It was one of them. I told my friend, run, and we ran into the neighborhood right next to mine. Ironically enough, I didn't think at this time we could have just hopped the fence of the people that lived behind us and been in my backyard, since nobody lived in the house at the time, but I didn't think of that at the moment. So we ran around this neighborhood and made a loop, and now we're afraid to leave because we're sure if this man was hiding somewhere to snatch us. So we walked out of the neighborhood in the middle and walked into the middle of the street and walked down a little and got up on the sidewalk again just to make sure he couldn't grab us if he was hiding somewhere. I looked behind and we see this guy chasing us again. We fucking ran. My neighborhood was right there, but I was so scared of him following me to my house. I think we lost him and we ran so fucking fast inside my house and hid in my room for the rest of the other night. Everybody was home, of course, so we felt safer. Let's never meet again, you two. I used to live in a city in Oregon that is on the I-5. There are about 3 things you need to know about Oregon and the I-5. Number 1. The I-5 is a hotspot for human trafficking in this country, the United States. It is estimated that a victim of human trafficking can net their trafficker roughly $200,000 a year by traveling down the I-5, which is known as the West Coast Track. I don't blame you if you didn't know that, because I didn't know that either until only semi-recently. The area where I live specifically is a pretty popular place for homeless people, drug dealers, and addicts, and all around pretty low-tier criminal activity, mostly involving weed, meth, and pills, and general mayhem. Property theft, damage, and home robberies happen around there with a frequency that some may find alarming. Truth be told, I've lived in worse conditions. Number 3. Oregon is an open carry state. This means you're allowed to carry a handgun on your person at any time, without the need for a permit, so long as it's in clear view, with the exception of maybe 5 cities in total. With those little details out of the way, let me begin to tell you that I didn't start driving until I was about 22 years old. As soon as I had my license, I would consistently go out for random drives just because I enjoyed it, which I still do to this day. Gas prices may be damned. At around this time, I was also dating a young woman. We'll go ahead and call Samantha. Samantha would often accompany me on these drives, seeing as she would stay at my house pretty regularly when she wasn't going to school, and oftentimes these drives would be at night. Now, if you've never driven around in a rural area before, let me tell you that it gets very, very dark on the back roads when you have the light source of your own. Without the headlights in my car, we literally could not see anything in front of us. I have come close to hitting animals many times, especially deer, and even one time a moose. It can be as scary as it is exhilarating. Many times I have simply stopped my car off the side of the road in a place with a few or no trees so that I could look at the stars. It's still one of my favorite activities when I'm out in the area. One night, Samantha and I drove into town to enjoy a little time in the bar. We didn't really drink much, especially not me. Just shot pool, danced, and hung out. We only stayed there a short time, no more than an hour, and then we decided we had enough and that we were going to head home. Once I got back in the car, I strapped my gun back onto my side, a Ruger Security 6 revolver loaded with .357 hollow point and 125 grain cartridges, which is still what I tend to use to this day when I'm wearing it, which I'd taken off before going inside. Open carry laws or not, no bar that I've ever been to allows firearms for obvious reasons. So, I get to driving us back to my place as usual. I took the back roads rather than the highway because of reasons I mentioned earlier. I simply enjoyed driving them much more. The radio was on and Samantha was paying attention to her phone. All was going as normal as a regular old drive can. However, I soon noticed once we had gone away from the suburbs little area of our town that there were a pair of headlights behind us. I only noticed because the headlights specifically, I don't enjoy having people drive behind me in the dark because of the glare. No biggie though, it's not a completely unusual thing to have someone behind you. Besides, they were a reasonable distance back, that the lights weren't presenting much of an issue. I made my turn onto the long road that would take us through the back way. Those dark, empty lanes, no lamps, no lights, just my headlights and the headlights behind me. Now, this first road that I turned onto is a long one. I want to say it's about 6 to 8 miles in of itself, so when the headlights behind me didn't disappear, I was still not concerned. We reached the end of this long road and I turned left. So did the car behind me. This time I made a right turn, and so did the car behind me. Another right, and this car yet again followed. Again, this isn't totally unusual. The path I've taken is made up of fairly busy roads, so it's not ridiculous that someone would be taking the same route as me. Still, I found myself keeping an eye on those headlights in my rearview mirror. They kept their distance. I reached the end of the road, a gas station on the corner, and I turned left. This road was yet another main road. Busy in the daytime, once more, that car turned with me. Now, I was mildly uncomfortable. "Hey," I said to Samantha. She didn't look up, so I reached over and nudged her with my elbow to get her attention. "Hey, this car behind us, it's been following us ever since we left town. Isn't that kind of weird?" I expressed my, admittedly, perhaps unfounded concern. She glanced at the passenger side mirror and shrugged. "Not really," she said. "You've been following the main roads. I bet they'll turn off any minute." I laughed it off. "Yeah, you're right." But still, I kept an eye on the trailing car. And now, so did Samantha. We continued along the main road, past several side street houses and little markets. I'm someone who likes to drive fast, so I pressed down on the gas pedal. At the time of night we were out, we would definitely be no cops on this road, so I knew I could get away with going way over the speed limit. And even as I sped up, this car kept pace. Still hanging back, I frowned as I realized this car was keeping up with us, getting a little more unnerved. I like to drive fast, sure, but most people in this area don't, especially not at night. When visibility is so poor, the only reason I did because I knew the roads really well, and I was too stupid and too self-confident in my newfound driving abilities back then to think I would be anything but safe going around these speeds. By now, Samantha had put her phone down and was watching the headlights behind us in her passenger side mirror more intently. I think I spooked her a little bit when I pointed out the car. I decided to myself she was right before. I was just being silly. We were sharing the main road, that's it. I flicked my turn signal and purposely turned onto one of the many small side roads that I absolutely did not have to take to get home. The street I had just turned onto led to more smaller back streets, and it would certainly take us longer to get back to my house. But I didn't mind that, as long as it got us away from this car that was behind us, and gave us some peace of mind. I think the two of us were just breathing a sigh of relief when we both saw the car turn onto this road with us. Immediately, I felt my gut tightening. There was just something about the way this car, despite how far back it was, casually turning onto the same street we did, even if nothing about that entire sentence is particularly alarming. Even if you've ever been followed or watched yourself, you'll know what I mean. Samantha must have felt the same way because I saw her turn to look at me out the corner of her eye. "It turned," she pointed out. "I know," I replied. "I see it." Another turn was up ahead of this road. I knew it was just a very long side road. It led down into a small neighborhood and then back around to the exact road we're still on, just further down the line. I quickly took this turn and decided that if this car turned with us, then it was definitely following us. There was no reason for me to turn onto this road other than to determine that, and at this point it was fairly certain there was no reason for the other car to turn down this road than to follow us. My suspicions were confirmed when the car turned. "Shit," I whispered to myself. Beside me and Samantha said my name nervously. I know, I assured her and bit my lip, trying to decide on what to do. I followed this side road, ignoring all the other little turns and driveways, until we reached the end of it. We were back at the road we had just left a minute ago. I quickly turned right, back to the way we would have been going from, should we have followed it. Once again, the car behind us turned. By now, panic was beginning to set in for Samantha and I. Making a sudden decision, I pushed the gas pedal down roughly, getting ahead of this car. Then just as quickly I stomped on the brake and pulled off to the side of the road. "What are you doing?" Samantha asked. "Let's get the hell out of here." "I'm not going home with this asshole following us," I told her, and took a deep breath. Readying myself. "Just stay in the car, okay?" Before I go any further, let me tell you, I'm not a particularly intimidating looking person. I'm short, wear glasses, and I'm fairly scrawny. Especially when this story took place, I basically look like a nerd, and I know it. I'm not what you think when you hear of the word tough guy, nor do I consider myself a particularly brave person. I'm not aggressive or macho, and I certainly don't put on a sort of bravado. I'm just not that kind of guy. Confrontation has never been, and never will be, my strong suit. She nodded, and before I could reconsider my opinion, I grabbed the door handle. Behind us, the car had slowed down and stopped by now, waiting for us to do something. I took off my seatbelt, opened the car door, and stepped outside. I turned around to face the car that had been following us this whole time. Its headlights were on, so I couldn't see the occupants. Hell, the only way I could really tell that it was a car, rather than a truck or SUV or something, was how low the lights were to the ground. I just stood there, staring at the front of the car and whoever was driving it. I couldn't see them, but they could see me, and I know damn well they could see the gun that was strapped to my waist. When I'm in place where I'm allowed to open carry, I typically have my gun strapped to my waist in what is referred to a cross draw. This means the gun is attached to my waist on the opposite side of my dominant hand. Facing the dominant hand in my case, I wear my gun on my left side. Turn to face to my right side. If you're having a hard time picturing this, Google Valkymer as Doc Holliday and Viola, or just the term cross draw itself. This allows my gun to be easily seen if you're standing anywhere but at a very specific angle, and also allows anyone to see me reaching for it, should I ever decide to, which I assure you is something every gun owner hopes they never ever have to do. The car sat there for a few seconds. I don't know exactly whoever was inside doing what. It was intense, and I'll admit I was scared. I had no idea why this car was following us or what the intention of the driver or whatever occupants, if there were any, were. But I had meant what I said. I was not going to drive directly to my house when I suspected someone was following me. If push came to shove, I was ready to fight, and I was showing them that by purposely standing to that with my gun on display. And let me be the first to admit that this was not a particularly smart plan. It was more of a knee-jerk fight-to-flight decision made in a split second. Finally, the car began to roll forward again. Not overly slow or overly quick, just at a regular pace, as if nothing was wrong. As it drove past, I turned to look at the side of it. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't even see with no light to support my eyes. The only thing I knew for certain was that this car was black and had darkened windows. I tried to get a look at the license plate as it passed me, but unsurprisingly, there were no rear license plate to see. The car drove all the way to the end of the road, then turned right, back the way we had come, back towards town. As its taillights disappeared around the corner, I let out a sigh of relief and quickly climbed back in the car without hesitation. I turned the car around and paced down the road, taking the unnecessary long way, adding only more side roads to that route, so that just in case the car had decided to be more cautious and try to follow us with its lights off. A foolish move. If you remember those dangers I've mentioned earlier, there was no way it would be able to keep up with us. As soon as we got back to my place, we locked the doors, I grabbed my shotgun, loaded it, and neither of us got any sleep until the morning. Luckily, nothing more ever came of it. Like I said at the beginning of all this, certain parts of Oregon, especially towns and cities along the I-5, have crime problems. I imagine that perhaps this person may have been spotter for human trafficking. My worst thought is that they have pegged us at the bar and intended on following us home so that they could abduct Samantha. Maybe I've seen too many movies, but knowing what I do, I really don't think it's that impulsive either. However, I could also have just been some local petty criminals looking for an easy place to break into. Or maybe it was just some dumb idiots who were looking to freak out some young kids driving around at night. In all honesty, I can't even be certain that it wasn't all just a coincidence and that they were never following us at all, but my gut tells me otherwise. I know that gun policies are a hot topic of debate among people, but I know that the fact that the gun I was carrying on my hip was a factor in whatever possibilities the driver of the car were calculating, and it tipped whatever scale there may have been in my favor. I feel as though I can safely say that my Ruger revolver saved my life. I'm a very safe owner and do not tolerate buffoonery when it comes to firearms. They are not toys, they are very dangerous weapons that can hurt just as many people as they protect. I take my protection very seriously. I never leave home without my personal sidearm on me. I've since moved to a new state and have gotten a concealed carry permit. It may not have the same deterring effect as open carry does, but at least I know I'll never be threatened in a situation without means to defend myself and those around me. My advice to anyone reading the story: take personal safety seriously. I highly recommend always carry something to defend yourself with. A stun gun, a can of pepper spray, or hell, even a knife. Anything at all. Self-defense should operate on the same principle as a condom. It's better to have it and not need it, than to need it and not have it. This, of course, extends to being aware of your surroundings. If you ever suspect that you're being followed, don't take the most direct route home. Either go back the way you came, preferably to a public place where a scene can be made, to somewhere else that you feel safe. Sure, going out of your way might cost you more time, gas, and cash, but it's worth it not to be followed home and jeopardize your safety.